Apologies for the slight delay. Namaskar. I have with me Utsav Chakrabarti as we analyze the moving developments in Syria. Bashar Assad is alive. He is actually holed up back in Moscow. I have a feeling that he never left Moscow after he went to Moscow a week ago. There was some news about he coming back and then he going to Russia and then whatever. So we have that news confirmed. Now let's welcome Utsav Chakrabarti to understand who won, who lost, and what is in it for the others. What's up? Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel. How are you?
Namaste, Shri. Happy to be back. Very eventful week, a very eventful month.
This is like blink of an eye and you'll miss. That's how fast things have changed in Syria. It is considered that this is a win for the deep state. It has tried 7 or 8 different conflicts, including Bangladesh, and looks like this is one clear win for the deep state. That's how I see. I could be wrong about it. So give us an idea of who won, who lost, and who is on the same level as they were before.
Thank you, Shri. And so you are right. I would agree with that. But let me give you a zoomed out view of the larger picture and who won and who are the losers in this. I must caution everybody, and this is for people who are observers of geopolitics. This is not a victory or a defeat yet. This is just a phase in the conflict in Syria, and it's like a big war in which there are segments and battles, groups of battles that each side is winning or losing. So this is not the end of it. Let me be clear about that. This is probably the beginning of the end of one phase. So if you go back and look at the Syrian civil conflict, what started in 2012, 2013, became one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 21st century as we see it today. Prolonged, protracted, a lot of nasty things came into this, and I won't go into all of those details. But today, last week, what we saw was the end of one phase of the conflict. There was a previous end of a similar phase, which actually was in favor of Assad, that ended in 2018 and 2019 by the end of Trump's, as Trump's first term was ending. So that was end of one phase. This is the end of another phase. There is a new phase that is going to begin here, especially because of the fact that Bashar al-Assad is alive and his family is alive, and they have sought shelter in Moscow and successfully have been able to leave Damascus and Syria. So look at the bigger picture. Here are the winners. The biggest winner in this conflict are the Sunnis, especially the radicalized Sunnis of Syria, which is a big majority of the population. They were winning in the beginning of the conflict back in 2011 to 2015 phase. They became multiple very dangerous groups. They became Al-Qaida in Syria. They became ISIS. Some of them merged together. It was, almost, in the morning I wear a shirt with the ISIS patch in it. In the evening I wear a shirt with Al-Qaida patch in it. And then later I become a Syrian rebel, moderate rebel. So that was happening all through this war. So the radicalized Sunni of Syria are the biggest winner in this. By extension, the second biggest winner as a nation is Turkey and its leader Erdogan. This is an absolute victory at this phase of the conflict for Erdogan. The third biggest winner in this, by virtue of what will be gained by them and their investment in the entire conflict over the last 10 years, 15 years, is the United States. The US had actively supported the rebels throughout the conflict. There were, literally every week, weapons were flowing in. And in fact, some of those weapons played a role in bringing the victory that we see today. So US is the third biggest winner in this. And of course, Israel, being the neighbor, is a short-term winner in this. I use the word short-term here because to Israel, the Sunni and the Shia divide was important. To Israel, the defeat of the Shia radicals, the Shia jihadis from Hezbollah and their backers, who were primarily operating through Syria and with the help of Assad, their defeat was important for Israel. It's a Faustian bargain. I'm sure Israel knows that. I'm sure Israel is aware of the fact that the current winners involves groups that are very close to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. In fact, some of the leaders are part of the winning side. And Israel is fully aware of that. So I'm sure Israel knows that the winners are not their friends either, but they might be a tactical ally in the short term. Yeah, please go ahead.
So a couple of things.
Yeah.
I can understand the native people, their majority have wrested back control for their land. So Sunnis, I'm okay. What does Turkey gain from this?
Yeah. So see, Turkey has two ways to look at this. Turkey has a historical outlook towards this conflict. Turkey sees it, and especially Erdogan, sees himself as a civilizational leader. He sees himself as the new caliph of the Ottoman Caliphate, as a continuation and revival of the Ottoman Caliphate. To conquer Syria is critical to the re-establishment of the Ottoman Caliphate. So, from a civilizational and a historical perspective, that is very important to Erdogan. In front of his own people, in front of the Sunni world, it's very important to him. Additionally, he's in terms of the strategic outlook in the region, he wants to create a buffer zone with the Kurds, as well as with Iran, as well as with Israel. And in doing what he just achieved, he has created a massive buffer zone that extends all the way south of Damascus, from southern Turkey, from Antakya and Idlib, which they had de facto conquered back in the early days of the civil war. So they have extended that buffer zone. They have put tremendous pressure on the Kurds, who, as you will see later on in my conversation, are one of the losers of this conflict. So it's overall a win-win situation for Turkey, a massive gain of geopolitical power in the region. Um, it also is a way for Turkey to backstab Russia, because Turkey was playing a double game between NATO and Russia, and now it clearly has given a big backstab on Russia. So multiple ways Turkey is a winner. Now, if I were to look at the losers of this,
hold on. I'm not done on the winner side.
okay,
Sorry.
okay.
United States. Let's take two parts: United States versus Deep State.
Correct.
Among these two, who won and why, and what do they get?
So, see, in this particular situation, the United States overall, whether you look at the quote-unquote establishment, or what many people call the deep state, or the average outsider, non-DC folks, they both had different objectives and different ways to look at this conflict. The deep state was obviously very much invested in it. The establishment in Washington, D.C. was invested in the war. It was very much supported during Obama's time. It was very much supported, even though Trump didn't want to support it, but the establishment kept on supporting the Syrian jihadis, the quote-unquote rebels, even during Trump's time, even though the support was significantly reduced at that time. So overall, it is an absolute win for the establishment. The so-called deep state wins this, hands down. The non-deep state part of the US is not necessarily on the side of Assad or whoever was fighting the Sunni Islamists. They were non-involved. They just wanted to disengage from the conflict. So if you look at it from the American perspective, it's a victory for the deep state, and it's a non-issue at this time for the non-quote-unquote deep state, which is very much reflected in the statement President Trump made just 2 days ago, where he's like, oh, big things are happening in Syria, big moves happening, we are not interested. I mean, obviously America is interested and is a winner in this, but again, Trump said it, we are not interested. So that's how I look at it. But there is no doubt that the American establishment won on this one.
Sergi, you've still not fully answered my question. What material gains does deep state get from here? Because Kurds have some oil, Syria does have some oil deposit, and that's in Kurdistan, or what they call as Kurds area.
Correct.
And that is not going to be easy for them to extract, because they are on the other side now, right? So what is deep state gaining materially?
So if you ask me specifically about the Kurds, there are multiple factions of the Kurds. So overall, what has happened with the Kurds is, and I was going to cover this later on as well, is that the Kurds have been pushed south. So the areas of Kurds that they actually are native to are going to be taken over by Turkey and its Islamist Sunni allies, and its Islamist Sunni proxies. The Kurds that are opposed to Turkey are now going to get pushed into the areas that Assad and the Shias or the Alawites used to control. So it's a compensation to the Kurds. At the same time, they're losing their primary homeland that they were fighting for. Now, here is the important part. The Kurds are the areas where the Kurds are getting pushed into used to be controlled by the Shias and were also oil rich, like Deir Azor in the east of Turkey, in the east of Syria, and south of Al Bukamal, which is further south of Deir Azor. those areas near the border with Iraq were areas where there was a lot of oil. And those areas where basically the conflict in those areas were between the Syrians and the Kurds, with the Americans supporting the Kurds there. So,
Correct.
I think the Kurds that are pro-America are going to take over some of the areas that are oil rich and will benefit America economically in extracting those areas, oil from those areas. But more importantly, what America achieves strategically in this area is it corners Russia completely.
It keeps Russia out of this area.
In the Mediterranean Sea. So Russia has two major bases, one naval base called Hamemin, which is in Tartus, in the coast of Syria. And there is another base which is basically a military base, an air force base. So both these bases, Hamemin I think is the air force base, and there is another one which is a naval base in Tartus. So these two, they are either getting isolated, which means that the Russians have to live in a contained zone at the mercy of NATO and Turkey, or they will have to evacuate it and leave the Mediterranean Sea, which is a strategic win for America against Russia. So that's a major victory. Additionally, they are able to push out. We Americans have been able to push out Iran from the Mediterranean Sea as well, because now Iran has no more access to the Mediterranean Sea. They are out of Lebanon, they are out of Syria, they have been pushed all the way back to Iraq. And that's a major strategic victory, which, by the way, benefits also Israel.
By the way, speaking of Israel, I also heard that Israel has taken out a chemical facility, chemical arms or something like that facility in Syria now, so that it won't fall in the hands of the rebels. That's what I heard. I don't know how true that is. So
there will be a lot of disinformation also along with it. I mean, there is no doubt that Israel has moved out of Golan Heights and taken over some of the border regions with Syria. And Israel will do that, because just like Turkey is creating a buffer zone, Israel will also create a buffer zone. So Syria is now going to essentially break up into smaller influence zones, if I can put it, because it's no more a state. And I don't think there will be a state named Syria very soon. Because, to be honest with you, the leader of the quote-unquote rebels who took over, Golani, is an Al-Qaeda guy. So he might be wearing a different dress right now. And I'm sure, I saw a CNN interview, and I'm sure he will be in other media outlets, wearing a suit and tie eventually. But but he's not, anybody who knows a little bit more about him will know that he's a ISIS and a Al-Qaeda sympathizer.
Thank you so much. And now we go to the interesting part, which is the loser side.
Yes.
Viewers, many of you have not still liked it. May I request all of you to like this video? We have 1 in 5 liking it, and I'd like to see that 1:1. Thank you very much in advance. We could do with much more viewership. This is the first time. The reason I'm doing it in the middle of the night for India is because this is breaking news. And those of you, we have, I would say, broadly 3 out of 10 viewers of P Gurus are outside of India. So they could be in various time zones. I just thought that those of us who are awake should know what is going on. A lot has happened in just 10 days. Now, let's get back to the loser column, starting with the most ones that get to lose the most, and in lower order.
So again, this is what I'm going to be presenting here is my view. Doesn't represent any
as of today. Yeah.
So biggest loser as of now are the Alawites. They have the Assad family. They all belong to the Alawite community. They are from the coast. They are from the area where Russia has its bases. So it's a very small community, but it had a massive amount of power in Syria throughout its history, because it had a big influence on the army. So the Alawites are the biggest loser. Next come the Shia, which is the next big minority in Syria. Alawites and Shias were aligned with each other throughout the conflict. That was primarily the reason why Iran and Hezbollah were able to participate and help Assad out, because there was a strong alliance from the beginning itself. So Alawites and Shias, the biggest losers. Along with them, and this is the part that most Westerners probably don't know or may not know much about, is that there are big Christian minorities in Syria. And you will see a lot of propaganda on this narrative, because, obviously, there are many Western-linked Christians who will say, oh, nothing has happened, the rebels are good and everything. But the reality is that the so-called moderate Syrian rebels that just took power hate the Armenians and the Orthodox Christians of Syria, who are historically been residents of that region for a long time. So Armenian Christians and Orthodox Christians are going to be huge losers. I'm hoping and praying that they do not suffer a genocide at the hands of the so-called, winners. Now, the next biggest losers would be the moderate Sunnis who aligned with Assad, which quite a few of them did, as well as the Druze. The Druze are a minority religious community in the entire Middle East. They span across multiple countries. They are in big numbers in Israel as well. Syria, they're in Lebanon. I know I have friends from that region who are Druze. Depending on who you speak to, some of them classify themselves as part of the larger Islamic pantheon. Some of them don't believe that they are Muslim. One unique thing that the Druze follow, like the Yazidis, is they believe in reincarnation. So, I would call them as proto-Vedic in many ways, but obviously since they are in the Middle East, their culture is very much intertwined with the Arabic and the Islamic culture. So the Druze are also one of the losers. One of the things they will be forced to do is to align with the new moderate Syrian rebels, because they have no choice. Otherwise, they will face genocide. Other than the Druze, I think in terms of nations, these are the communities in Syria that are going to lose. Now let's go to the nations. The nations that will be losing the most are obviously Iran. Iran has, as I pointed out in the previous conversation, Iran has been shunted out from the Mediterranean coast, no access to the waters. Hezbollah has been completely decimated. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been decimated, and it's all its allies. All the coalition of Shia groups that Iran had built during the early stages of the Syrian conflict. They were Pakistani Shias who were fighting in Syria against ISIS and Al Qaeda under Fatimu brigade, or they would name a brigade in the name of Prophet Muhammad's wife, and they would be part of the Shias from all over the world. They were Afghan Shias who had fought in Syria. So all these groups, these militias, Shia extremist militias, have been defeated, and they have to leave Syria, otherwise they'll be killed. So Iran is a loser, Shias are the loser. Kurds are next in line as losers, because they are losing the main areas where they come from. They will be displaced, but there will be less of losers than the Alawites or Iran or Shia, because they will be compensated with some areas that they will reoccupy away from the Shias and the Alawites. So they will take away some of those areas that Assad controlled. After the Kurds, obviously Russia is a big loser in this. I think Russia had no choice. And this is a strategic defeat for Russia in the Middle East. They had no choice. They are stretched thin in Ukraine. They could not sustain their bases in Syria and keep the conflict alive. I think Russia was counting more on Iran as well as Assad's forces to push back the rebel offensive. They could not. They saw that was not happening, so they just made a deal and accepted defeat in the short term. And this is the interesting part. There is another loser now. That's UAE and Saudi Arabia. So both of these are Arab nations that had warmed up to Assad after the civil war had reached a stalemate, and Assad had regained back 60 to 70% of Syria that he had earlier lost. And it was almost looking like the Al Qaeda and all these Islamist groups have been defeated. But both these sides, UAE and Saudi Arabia, are now completely isolated in that Sunni Islamic world, with Turkey taking over the absolute leadership of the radical groups, and UAE and Saudi Arabia now being side players, almost insignificant in this region now. I mean, they can compensate for it over a period of time with money and so on and so forth. Probably Qatar will play a bigger role than both of these Saudis and the UAEs. But overall, it's a defeat for them as well. It just happened that they chose the wrong side. I mean, they thought that the war was over. They can switch from supporting the rebels to supporting Assad, and then suddenly Assad collapses. So they lose. So that's the list of losers here.
Thank you so much, Utsav. Before we wind down the show, I just want your inputs on what is happening in Ukraine, because I'll just tell you what I'm reading. And this is WhatsApp University viewers. This is not something that I can say I can bet my bottom dollar on this. But what I'm hearing is that there is some sort of an agreement that is people are reaching towards, where Putin and Trump are actually doing this. And Trump has got a couple of emissaries who are working in Russia to try and get the thing, the lines, the essentially the I's dotted and the T's crossed. What I'm hearing, and you feel free to let me know whether we'll have differences, of course. You're closer to the heartbeat than I am. So what I'm hearing is that the Dnipro River to the west of that is going to go to Poland, and that will become NATO protected. The Dnipro River's right side will be a buffer state of remaining Ukraine, with whatever is captured by Russia staying with Russia, with only thing that is still not decided is Odessa. Whether this buffer state will need to get access to sea or not, that is what is being decided. This is what I heard, that something even deep state is getting behind, because they have bought a lot of lands west of Dnipro River, which is supposed to be one of the more fertile regions. Even east is very fertile, but that's also war ravaged. This is what I heard. Your thoughts on this? And I think something is happening there also.
So I would partially agree. I won't go into the details of this. This could be one of the solutions, and I would believe that barring the part with that it becomes everything west of Dnipro becomes part of Poland, I don't think Russia would agree to that specifically, and I don't think even Romania will agree to that, because Romania and Moldova will say that, hey, what about us? We also have ethnic groups west of the Dnipro, and we want a piece of the pie, and we are part of NATO too. So why just give Poland everything? So, with barring those nuances west of the Dnipro River, I do believe that that is probably a plan that is out there. I also do believe that Russia is very much interested in getting Odessa, because that is the way they can connect to the little sliver of land that Russia control in the Transnistria region right next to Moldova. And they are very much desperate to be able to protect that piece of land that they have. And Odessa is the only way they can get there through land. So Russia would be interested in that. So I do feel this is a good idea in terms of finding a compromise. I also believe that what happened in Syria will have a lot of bearing on what's happening in Ukraine. There could be a possibility that Russia's complete withdrawal from the Mediterranean could have been part of a larger game plan, where the quote unquote NATO and the American side gives them more in their immediate neighborhood in Ukraine, while forcing them to leave the Middle East, and by virtue of that also isolating Iran, because now Russia leaving Tartus and Hammeim makes Iran somewhat of an orphan in that area next to the Mediterranean. So lot of games here, lot of complications here. It is very hard for all of us to put a finger on anything. I'm pretty sure it's hard for President Biden also to put a finger on everything at this time, but that's what it is. Let's see what's happening. But the more important part of this conversation is that nothing is over yet. This is part of a larger continuum. Do not think that the war in Syria is over. I believe that this is the beginning of another stage of conflict. And I also believe that Israel is fully aware that those who came to power in Syria right now are no more friends than what Assad was. And even though Israel may not say it like that now, Israel will eventually know that.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions from our viewers. Maybe we can just address those. The first question is from Elmo D'Souza. My guess is that US used Turkey to topple Assad so that Israel could further increase their land beyond Golan Heights. Your thoughts?
I would use the word US used Turkey because Turkey was very much interested to do what it was doing. The US may have found common ground with Erdogan on this, and may have found a willing ally in this effort. So, to me, it is very clear that in this conflict, Erdogan was far more interested in working and allying with the Sunni jihadis in Idlib, who he funded and literally kept alive for 5 years when they were defeated, much more than even the US was. So I don't think US used Turkey. I think US and Turkey found common ground in this. And ironically, Turkey and Israel found common ground in this, even though if you were watching the rhetoric out in the social media space as well as in the public sphere, there was so much animosity between Turkey and Israel, and Turkey was making an extra effort to bite at Israel in the public space, all the while all this planning was going on in the background.
Yes, indeed. Last question from Arun. Is the move meant to preempt any expected Trump administration changes?
it is hard to see that everything in that happened here was aimed only at Trump. I doubt that. I don't think anybody could predict that this would unfold in the way it unfolded. I think a lot of decisions were made at the last moment. A lot of negotiations happened within the last month. There was possibly a Trump factor to it, in the fact that Trump had made multiple statements saying that America should not be in Syria. America should leave Syrian bases that it still controls. And but I'm not sure that that is going to happen right now, because, to be honest, now what has happened in Syria, I think America will need more soldiers there to keep Israel and all these other things that are happening there in contained mode. So I don't think America can leave Syria now.
Thank you so much, Utsav. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We'll be back on to talk about this topic, because, like Utsav said, this is the beginning of one end of one phase. So this is a mega serial. Thank you so much, Utsav. We'll see you soon. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Utsav, hang back.